You're listening to the Black Eagles podcast with Sinan and Kaan.
Ahmet Dursun Sergen aldı. Sergen Bülent yan yana. Sergen Bülent. Sergen. Yanında Tümer var. Tümer'e doğru aksın kaybetti. Tümer topu aldı. Sergen aldı. Gol! Gol! Gol! Sergen attı. Sergen attı. Şampiyonluk geldi. Sergen attı. Şampiyonluk geldi.
İbrahim'in pası. Zuma. Şimdi Ahmet. İkinci gole gidiyor Beşiktaş. Ahmet.
Welcome back, everyone. Episode 23 of the Black Eagles podcast. Sinan here, live from New York City, with my co-host Kaan. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause. And of course, today.
Hello, everybody.
Sorry, yeah, we do a lot of stuff in post, so like you'll get the hang of it, John. Today we have a very special guest, Jon Townsend, from These Football Times. Also a coach, and also a fellow gringo from here in the States, like myself, Jon Townsend. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. How you doing?
Great.
Doing great. We just signed your goalkeeper. Woohoo!
We sure did. Which is why you're here, Mr. Townsend. Now, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jon. Where are you from? You know, if you have any background info you think that people need to know.
So yeah, thanks for having me on. It's good to join you both. So I'm originally from, obviously, the States, from Chicago area. Live in St. Louis now. Played competitively through college, a little bit after college, and then found myself coaching now, writing about the game for These Football Times in both print and then the digital platform on the website. Do a lot of work on player development, so I don't necessarily focus on a squad that I have. I have a bunch of players from different other squads, so when I do my coaching, it's technical development. Mm-hmm. Overall, I have family and friends from Liverpool. I kind of fell into looking and supporting that team growing up, but as I've learned, the one rule when you write about the game is to not be too biased toward a team sometimes, and so I support them from where I'm at, but I'm also very critical of the moves and the players and the decisions and the inner workings of the club as far as I can tell. I know that it's very interesting from our perspective here in the States what's going on because they have American owners and whatnot. But but I think with any club there's a lot of complexity and a lot of potential for certain moves to lay out the groundwork for either success or peril going forward. So it's fitting that we have this conversation about Karius and how he's going to do in his new league and his new team, and I'm excited to talk about him.
Before I hand over the reins to Kaan, because I think he has a lot of questions prepped, my lead-in question, because of course this is a Beşiktaş podcast, what as an American fan of the English league, what has been your perception of Turkish football, like historically? Do you know much about it? Like, surely, of course, you've heard of Beşiktaş, given that you're on our podcast, and Karius is just. Sure. But do you have the Welcome to Hell, Galatasaray? Do you have any sense of that type of stuff?
Yeah, admittedly, the perceptions as an American of Turkish football, I've always actually admired the passion of some of the more notable teams. And you hear about the stories of away teams going to Turkey and finding it to be incredibly difficult, both technically on the field and the atmosphere, and then the competition, and how some games are won or lost prior to even kicking a ball. Sure. I do know that Turkey produces some phenomenal players. I have really fond memories of I believe it was in the 2002 World Cup. Turkey. There was I forgot who it was, but it was a player who absolutely. I think it was against Roberto Carlos. Did like a.
Ilhan Mansur, I'm so glad he's actually a Beşiktaş legend. That's perfect.
Okay, well it fits well.
And he's
I've always
an
had an
assistant
affinity
coach
for
too.
The skill and the players that come out of Turkey. Obviously, if you follow German football, you kind of get some viewpoints into some of the players that have chosen to play for Germany, and then had the geopolitical part of how that works out, and that gets messy. But obviously, I think there's a lot to understand as a Liverpool supporter about the Istanbul game of 2005 and what that atmosphere was like. But in terms of from afar, I've always seen Turkish football in the eye, through the eyes of the lens of the bigger teams. Fenerbahce and Beşiktaş and Galatasaray. And I'm sure there's plenty of more that I forget. I'm not coming to mind, but
that's about the bulk of the success stories anyway. But
be careful, or some Trabzonspor is going to stab you on the street, Sinan.
They're like the New York Knicks of Turkish football. They won in the 70s and they're still living off the fumes of that. As a Knicks fan, I sympathize, but let's be real here. But anyway, sorry, that's like a insider Turkish football joke. But yeah, that was a perfect response. That's exactly what I was sort of looking for. And yeah, also as an American, but being a half Turk, I obviously have ties to it. So if I feel like I don't have the objective kind of American perspective about what people think or see in Turkish football, so I'm always curious. But yeah, cool. Now, Kaan, I know you have a ton of questions, so let's dig into Karius.
Let's get to the meat and potatoes, as I always like to say. Let's get to Karius. You were talking about earlier that you are more into talent acquisition, I believe, something that you're looking towards while you're writing and stuff like that. So, how did you see the Karius move initially? You guys bought him from Mainz.
So I think that a lot of that has to come from Klopp's history at Mainz, and his affinity for that club, his history with the club as a player, as a manager, knowing the system in and out of who's coming through the ranks. Obviously being from Germany, Karius representing Germany at the youth level. Probably saw him at Stuttgart a little bit. And I think that the idea of bringing in a keeper with a connection with the manager, in Jurgen Klopp, and having an understudy for Mignolet, and even in the Bundesliga, having someone behind Neuer, just in that mold of bringing him through at a young age. I think that a lot of people don't understand that Karius played for Manchester City's youth team, so he had experience in England, and then his senior career with Mainz 2, and then the senior team tended to kind of grease the groove for him to be given a 5-year deal for a relatively cheap fee to Liverpool. And initially, from a fan perspective, a lot of people saw him get the number 1 kit number, and they assumed that this was going to be the keeper, and he was signed at quite a young age. And I think in 2016 there was a lot of maturation that had to happen for him to get his introduction into an environment like the Premier League as opposed to the Bundesliga.
Okay, so how was his first season in your opinion? How did he settle in? Did you because he obviously had that hand injury, I think, which kind of hampered his initial ability to settle into the team. When he first started getting into the team, started getting playing time, what did you think of him? Was he what's your opinion on that first few months for Karius after his injury?
So initially, I think Jurgen Klopp did a good job of bringing him in and playing in some cup games against, I think, at Derby County he played, and then he played in a one-sided victory, I think, against Hull City, and then the real test, I think, came when he was in goal against Manchester United, and it was a 0-0 draw, but he kept a clean sheet, and then he would eventually get that first choice goalkeeper, slot. But then that, as all the good that happens with the high levels in England, the bad. There was one game in particular where I think it was against Bournemouth, where Liverpool were leading so late on, and then it was, I actually turned the game off thinking they were going to win, and I went to go play my own game, and I realized that Karius had, made some howlers, some blunders, and immediately Klopp removed him from the press and took him out of the crosshairs of everybody, stating that he was young, stating that he was prone to mistakes, stating that he will be able to bounce back. So I think his first season really did indicate some of the things that are highlighted later on in his Liverpool career, and then obviously highlighted for everyone to see in the Champions League final. But a lot of the fundamentals that got him into the squad also got him out of the squad many times.
So obviously this past season, the 2017-18 season, he came back into the team, I believe, around January or something, replacing Mignolet, who had started the season as a starter. Well, I'm not 100% sure on why exactly. I guess Mignolet didn't put in the performances that was expected of him. But tell us a little bit more about the second half of the season and the role he played in Liverpool getting to the Champions League final, and also, their final position in the league.
So Mignolet, to me, has always been a very good goalkeeper in terms of shot stopping, and he does make some phenomenal saves. But on the other end, he does make some errors that make anybody kind of wonder. And I think with him and Karius getting this position, was Liverpool was in this conundrum with their goalkeeping situation, because their defense obviously had some shifting. Virgil van Dijk came in. There's a lot of Gomez was out. There's a lot of shifting in the back line, and they're such an attack-heavy team that a lot of that was hidden by the fact that there was this trio up top who could just score goals almost at will. Mignolet over the years, and Karius to some effect too, one has to wonder how many points or how many games Liverpool lost due to goalkeeping errors along, whether it was a fumbling of a ball going between her legs, maybe it was a cross that was misjudged, maybe it was the ball's been parried into the path of a player. And both goalkeepers tended to do the same type of errors. So the conundrum was, are they a like for like switch? I think when Karius became the starter, it was to solidify the back line and bring some continuity to the team. Mignolet obviously had many years to hold that position down, and it was time for some fresh pair of hands in the back, maybe a fresh style perhaps. And I always liked Karius in terms of his ability to be calm under pressure with the ball at his feet, his ability to make some very, very good saves, reaction saves, secondary saves. His distribution was very good, considering his age and his kind of waiting in the doldrums for his chance. And so by the time that he becomes the starter, I think there's a lot of credit that should go his way to getting Liverpool to where they were. He made some phenomenal performances that I didn't expect, and I don't think a lot of Liverpool supporters and journalists and people watching this team expected out of him. And again, a lot of this was also because the trio up front, Firmino, Salah, and Mane, were scoring goals in bunches, and so it took the attention off of the goalkeeping, off the defending. There was some great performances where Liverpool beat Manchester City multiple times, and obviously, you're not going to change that chemistry from the back line on forward. So I think at the time he changes goalkeeper Jurgen Klopp, I think Karius is a good choice. I think it's the right choice, considering he's turning out performances. For every one error, he's got 5 or 6 great saves in them. Mm-hmm. So that's what I saw.
So predating the Champions League final this past season, so purely this past season, were there really any moments where you're like, that was a huge mistake? Because sometimes, a goalkeeper gets the blame, but it's really the defending that's leaving him down and stuff like that. Even sometimes on certain shots, you're not going to be able to keep hold of them. You're going to have to punch him, and you're just going to have to rely on your defenders to clear it, rather than one of the opponent's attackers tapping it in. That's also part of goalkeeping. So were there really any moments this past season before the Champions League final where he totally lost the plot? I
honestly didn't think that there was any single one error. I think anytime you look at a goalkeeper's performance, it's kind of unfair because a striker can miss anything for 89 minutes, they score one, and then they're the hero in the 90th minute.
Right.
A goalkeeper can have a great game and block 9 out of 10 shots. That one shot goes and you lose 1-0. You're the villain. I think in terms of Loris Karius's errors, or there's not one definitive moment for me. And this is before the Champions League final. So this is just during the season. This is when he gets the starting position. There's a time where there has to be some gelling of the defense. There has to be some consistency. And I think a lot of fans saw that he's going to need some time, but they weren't willing to give that to him. I think in the Premier League, every mistake is highlighted. Everything is, there's criticism that he is being played favorite to Klopp because it came from the same club, from the same country. There's plenty of that. I think any goalkeeper is going to ebb and flow. I think the fact that you'll see when Iker Casillas comes out and to his defense, a legend for Real Madrid and Spain has to come out and say, look, this is goalkeeping. This is what happens in our position. And to be fair, Liverpool's defense has always been suspect. It has not been the strongest and has not been the most secure. If you're a goalkeeper in front of you, you are going to make mistakes because there's gaps. You don't have the continuity in the back line that other teams in the Premier League do. You don't have the consistency in the back line that other teams do. And so I think he was put in a situation at Liverpool where, and before this, just around this time, Liverpool has started inquiring about Alisson. So there is some thought that Karius was a short-term solution. However, I do think that there was not one definitive error. There was a couple howlers for sure, but there was no different than you'd see from other keepers, Peter Cech in the league, or you see from, Mignolet before, you'd see from, even David De Gea in his early days at Manchester United. He made some absolutely awful errors. People would call him flappy hands because he would flap the ball right into the path of an oncoming striker. He was bad on crosses, and now he's arguably one of the world's best goalkeepers. So to me, I thought Karius had an unfair scrutiny on him early on. I think as the season matured, he got more games. The stage also increased, right? He's playing against teams in Europe. He's playing against Manchester City. He's playing in Liverpool's now. They have Mo Salah and Mane and Firmino tearing it up in the front. And so the expectation rises for everybody. I think in any season, a lot of teams would love to have a keeper like Loris Karius in the Premier League. I think a lot of teams would kill to have a keeper of his ability and his youth. Even though he makes mistakes, I think he's still young, and I think goalkeeping position is an unfair one in that regard.
For sure.
So do you feel that? Are you a little bit surprised that he's moving away from Liverpool now, but he's going to Turkey and not to, for example, a Hull City or another Premier League club, or maybe even a Bundesliga club or something like that? Does that something that surprises you?
It does surprise me insofar that I thought he would go to a Bundesliga club. I thought he'd go back to Germany, maybe back to Mainz or somewhere. I thought that him staying in England at this time was probably the worst thing for him personally. I think playing wise, I think he'd be fine, but I think the abuse and the scrutiny and the attention he was getting surprised even me. I think during the Champions League final, when I knew the game was out of reach, I was actually tweeting, before everybody completely destroys this man, he's a big reason why Liverpool's even here. So this could happen to a lot of players. And I think Liverpool fans, like a lot of teams and passionate fans, almost made him as a pariah. He like anything that went wrong was his fault. And I think that as the stakes got higher and this fan base has wanted a trophy for so long, especially the European nights at Liverpool are things of legend. I think that factored into having to remove him from the big league and putting him somewhere where he can develop. He can get first team football in a competitive league with still having the option to possibly, make a name for himself in Turkey. He's going to play in a situation, hopefully, where if he does perform, he's got the option, I think, to stay in Turkey, or he can, make his move. But I think it's a good decision to get him out of England. I was surprised to go to Germany.
So speaking of surprise, we've mentioned Mignolet, and Is there a palpable surprise or even maybe disappointment that it wasn't Mignolet that was gotten rid of, rather than Karius because of his youth and maybe potential? Or was there just a general sense that we need to get rid of maybe even both of them? What is the sense regarding Mignolet there?
So I think Mignolet is even confused about this move for Karius. I think Mignolet wants first team football. He will not get it with Alisson there. So I think people were surprised to see him retained and Karius shipped off. But I think what the story within the story is Karius' mental state, like his emotional state, him as a person. I think the idea that, like I said, Iker Casillas had to put out his own highlight reel of bad performances, and there was a couple messages on social media from Karius about almost like depression awareness, very heavy stuff. I think what affected him after that Champions League final really could make or break a person, not just a player, a person. And I think that he is. This was a move to get him to play the game he loves, that he's good at, but remove him from the spotlight that is the English press, because the English press is unforgiving. And I think that in this regard, the idea that there were two errors in the Champions League final against Real Madrid, I think that was it almost was unable to recover from that. And I think this is a good move to at least get him away, but still let him play in a start of a new campaign, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is Beşiktaş, they back-to-back, they start the league with back-to-back victories, or kind of get him in that mix while they, are on a high, sort of. So I think he's going to be playing in maybe their Europa League qualification.
We may need him on Thursday, as it turns out, but that's a whole other conversation. But yeah.
Well, he won't be able to play yet on Thursday.
Because he's not registered, is he?
But
that's right.
Yeah, but it almost sounds like as if Jurgen Klopp, which I assume had a hand in this, is kind of sending him away rather to more so to protect him in a way. I have from everything you're saying. It's the vibe I'm getting.
Yes, I think Jurgen Klopp was one of the first to say after the game to bring up the idea that he had a concussion and to come to his defense in terms of the knock he took from Sergio Ramos. I think the idea that Jurgen Klopp took a first-hand defense of the player and sent him to Germany to get evaluated and really tried to just get those concussion awareness results published. One of the things that people don't really know is the concussion awareness has these markers, and there's 30 of them. And 5 days after the final, Loris Karius had 26 of the 30 markers for concussion.
Oh wow!
So I think anyone who sees his dynamics, has seen him play, the mistakes he made. The third goal especially, and for the first goal too, but the mistakes he made are completely evidence to me, just as a former player and as a coach. Let's look for these things from my amateur perspective. He's injured, and I think a lot of what Liverpool did wrong was they kept him in the game. And I think that's another story within the story, but I think it's to protect him overall.
And of course, concussion awareness has become a real big thing in the United States over the past decade or so with the NHL and
NFL
wrestlers and stuff like the NFL and then professional wrestlers and stuff like
probably the NHL too. Honestly, that's a pretty tough sport.
But in Europe, it's not such a big deal because we don't have this mainstream American football type of sport where there is a lot of that physical contact, and concussions happen in football too, of course, but far less frequently. So I think that the European awareness of how severe concussions can affect and impact a person is smaller than perhaps in the United States.
Yeah, could be.
So. Do you now to get back to this? You already alluded to it earlier that there had been contact with Alisson before, But do you think that had he not made mistakes in the Champions League final, win or lose, if he would have put in a normal good performance, do you still think that Liverpool would have forked out 75 million pounds for Alisson?
I think that after the tie with Roma in the Champions League semifinal, I think it was clear that Liverpool were going to go for the keeper, and I think what Liverpool saw in a keeper like Ederson, for example, was the ability to play a similar style, and it's almost like having another field player with the ability at his feet, and his quality. And so they saw that with Man City, and I think the logical move was, should a player become available of that caliber, to obviously compete for that in the transfer window. For years, the board and fans and journalists had wanted a big signing at the goalkeeper position. And I think that is definitely something Liverpool have lacked for as long as I can remember. So when Alisson was flighted in the press, I think I expected Mignolet to go and Karius to be his understudy. And it's kind of interesting that Alisson did show up and refused to take the newly vacated number 1 jersey from Karius. He said, out of respect for Karius, I'm not taking it. So does it leave the door open for his return, or is he building the man up of Loris Karius and saying, this is still your kit? A classy move, but I think that in terms of what I expected Mignolet to go and Karius to stay and get minutes in the cup competitions and maybe some of the other league games, and Alisson to be his mentor in many ways.
Okay, so how would you say, you already touched about it on strengths and stuff before, but you just talked about Alisson's tremendous footwork, and Ederson is also known for his footwork, of course, Manchester City's goalkeeper. How would you say Karius's footwork is? Is it good? Is it bad? Rich?
I think it's good. I honestly think that Liverpool was actually starting to play a much better style, playing out of the back with Karius in goal, because one of the things that he was willing to do was receive the ball to his feet and be composed and play to a center back who had gone wide to the sideline to basically invite the press in. And it worked well against Man City. It worked well against Roma the first leg. It worked well against most teams in the Premier League. I think that was another element that a lot of people who look at goalkeeping just look at the reactive part of it. They don't look at the proactive part. And what you'll notice with Karius, especially in Turkey, is if you look at how he plays with the ball at his feet, he's very quick to look for the first outlet, but he will pick the second outlet. So skipping, technical term is skipping line. So he'll, instead of playing to a defender, he'll actually play to a winger. He'll drive the ball to a winger or play it on the ground directly to them and stride. Yep. Very good at that. I think
which increases the tempo. Oh, sorry to interrupt you. That's definitely something that Beşiktaş lacked actually over the past 2 years. I think we have some troubles in increasing the tempo, especially when Fabry wasn't playing, because he just joined Fulham and he is also really good with this. So it's definitely something that I'm very happy to hear.
Yeah, and a big scare with our current keeper / backup is that our defenders have no confidence passing the ball back to him because he's so poor at distributing it. So that's been a huge kind of thorn in our side early on in the season, and the main kind of contributor to most of the fans being so excited and thrilled about the Karius entry. And I don't know if you saw the scenes from the airport when he arrived, John, but Beşiktaş fans are overwhelmingly thrilled that he's arrived. So he's in good hands, I think we can say.
No, I did see his arrival. It did look. I was actually surprised on how well received he was, just because of the treatment in England's been so terrible. And he was here in the States, and I saw, some of the highlights of fans just seeing Liverpool here. But I think he's going to find. In my opinion, I think he's going to find a home there. I think he's going to be happy and I think it's going to allow him to get valuable games in, and he may enjoy, being in that competitions that Beşiktaş finds themselves in. He may find first team football, and he may actually become a much better player. And I think there's an option for him to stay there. So
There is,
in 2 years, it's a good loan spell. It's enough time for him to get his mind right. It's a good time for him to get acclimated to the culture, to his new team, to the style. I have to say that he's probably going to be off the pace in terms of he might be playing too quick to start, because he's used to the frenetic pace of the not just the Premier League, Liverpool. They're very, very fast in transition. So he might almost help Beşiktaş increase their transition from.
This is great. This sounds great to us, by the way.
No, I think it's all positives. I think that's it's a good fit for him. And I think it's one of those situations where this was done. It wasn't a secret. It was going to get him to Turkey. He's going to play. He's going to get, again, an environment where people are happy to see him. They're happy to welcome him in. He wasn't going to get that in England, and he might not have gotten that in Germany. I think the scrutiny in Germany could be arguably just as tough as in England. So this is a very good move. I think if you're a Beşiktaş fan, this is a very good move for you.
Yeah, we feel that way. Sorry, Kaan, you had something to say as well, I think.
Oh no, it wasn't very important. There's just one more thing, because I'm going to ask you how do you see him do at Beşiktaş, but I think you already kind of answered that. But we spoke a lot about negatives, unders, and all that stuff. But are there some performances that jump out to you where he did good performances in particular?
I think the game against the league game last January against Manchester City, the win was one of the first games that I saw him just completely control the game. I think that obviously the first leg against AS Roma, that was an interesting test for him, because on the other side of the field is your potential replacement. But I think if you look at his performances leading up to the final, save the second leg against Roma when Liverpool did their best to not qualify for the final. I think what you saw was a keeper who began to get more confidence and more personality in his goalkeeping. It was a much different style than Mignolet. It was with the introduction of both Karius and Van Dijk. You saw a dynamic shift in the way even a player like Lovren, who gets a lot of stick in Liverpool, he elevated his game. I think it was a quicker transition for him as a goalkeeper, and the backline had confidence to play to him. They had confidence that he was going to save what was behind him, and on crosses he was much better than Mignolet was. As a shot stopper, the first shot comes in, the second shot he's already up, making a secondary save. And bailing his defenders out. So you're getting a very, very technically sound goalkeeper with 49 appearances for Liverpool under his belt. And I think that, he, for a young keeper, he's well traveled and has some good experience in some very tough environments. And honestly, I think he will become a better player having played in that Champions League final, even though they lost, even though he was blamed for it. It's almost like you hit rock bottom, right? Where do you go from there? The only place to go is up.
That's right. It's like you got to get knocked down to get up, right?
And this could define him. I use David De Gea as another example. I mean, he was such a clumsy goalkeeper when he came from Atletico to Man United, and everyone was against him, and they kept him in the starting lineup, and there's a different dynamic. But he kept plugging away. He kept, and I think this is a great example of, Klopp putting a young player in a good situation. And again, he may find himself, really loving life in Turkey.
Yeah. Why not? No, that's great stuff. That's really great stuff, Jon. Certainly, I think in Turkey there can be a lot of scrutiny on players, but at the same time, there is a strong sort of familial vibe going through clubs, and it's almost, in particular when you have a case like Karius's, I think Beşiktaş fans will really get behind him and have even a kind of high tolerance for him to, get his feet grounded and, even if he makes a few errors early on, I really don't foresee Beşiktaş's fans kind of turning on him because, they're a very passionate bunch. We are a very passionate bunch, but also a very loyal bunch. So I think, it should be a great fit. But anyway, Jon, thank you so much for coming in. I know, you have duties of your own now, but I wanted to cut this up just to make sure you had enough time to plug yourself, plug anything you're doing, any projects. Certainly give us, drop your Twitter handle, anything of that nature.
Sure, thanks. So first of all, thanks for inviting me on. It's been really nice talking to you both, and I know that there's a lot of unknowns that come with this goalkeeper, but I think it's a massive upswing too. So I'm actually sad as a Liverpool fan to see him go, but I'm happy he's going to a place where you guys can appreciate him.
Certainly.
My current work, I have an article out today on it's part of a new series at These Football Times called Duology. It's the 40 most impactful partnerships in world football. So I did 2 pieces on that. One was Ruud Gullit and Marco van Basten and their partnership, actually with Frank Rijkaard too, is the trio. But and then I did another one on Johan Neeskens and Johan Cruyff, how they work together, and that will come out later this week. I have unfortunately, I don't have a piece in the upcoming magazine, but I do have a very hard to write forward for one of our writers and our friends at These Football Times who passed away on August 13th. So I wrote a tribute for him. So that'll be in the next magazine. I think people should really enjoy that. And then I have a couple more articles coming out for These Football Times. I do regular features then more than I used to, but not as much as I probably should. But my Twitter handle is Jon _Townsend TOWNSEND 3. Twitter is a fun place. I get into a lot of fun discussions and some arguments, some banter, and all that good stuff. So it's a fun follow if you if you want to. But yeah, that's where I'm most active. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jon. It's always great to have expertise come join this. We like to pride ourselves on creating a wing of Beşiktaş fans that are kind of informed and way beyond just what's happening in Turkey or in Turkish football. So it's great to have you here to enlighten us all. And yeah, thank you so much. You know your stuff.
I appreciate it, guys.
I'd also just like to add our condolences for.
Of course, yeah. By all means, yes.
I appreciate it.
And certainly we hope to be in touch with you going forward. We'll shortly have more questions for you regarding the Premier League.
Well, we definitely hope that you'll be maybe paying some more attention to the Turkish league now.
That's right, sure.
Since Karius is technically still Liverpool's player, so you're always welcome to #come to Beşiktaş yourself.
That's right.
All right, well, I'll be sure to do so.
Thanks for coming in, Jon.
All right, take care, guys.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Well, that was a really fun conversation. I enjoyed it. How did you find being part of your first interview?
It was great. I felt like it came natural to me.
Well, definitely we'll be sending you out on some assignments soon.
No, that was a lot of fun. And Jon was a really nice guy. Seems like he really knows his stuff. It's great to have him.
He had really good recollection of all those games. I mean, that was really maybe he cheated and he did some work beforehand, but like he could just name it off the bat like that. I think I'd have difficulties with that, despite the fact that I consider my memory to be relatively good.
Well, even if he prepared for it, that's the mark of a good professional. He did his work. So it's not cheating if it's in the service of quality content for Beşiktaş International.
Yeah, for sure. But there's some really good stuff I hear there, man. And you know what? I hadn't considered this yet, but what he says was that really struck a chord with me was he already hit rock bottom. Where is there to go from here? Only way is up, right?
That's right.
So I think, actually he might have a good point there that this Champions League final in the long run is going to end up being beneficial to him in the sense that it might actually make him stronger mentally.
I'm going to say this, since this is going to be an episode light on, Kaan and Sinan content, because we're handing it over. We'll explain that in a minute. I'm going to take this to a philosophical level really quickly here. Take it deep. The reality is that I think hardship and struggle are beneficial to success. And that's where you learn what you're made of. And we'll see what he's made of. I sense he's got what it takes to kind of persevere through hardship. But the reality is, like, you look at the world around you. The best art comes from hardship. The greatest songs about love come from like the despair of losing it. So in the big picture, one can't look at him having experienced this as such a negative. Like, one has to. What I'm trying to say here is that to reach real greatness, one has to sort of find the depths of, the opposite.
Yeah, plus, it's also, in the sense as a fan, I think you need to experience rock bottom as well to truly appreciate being at the top and realizing that never lasts, which is particularly important, I think, for the past couple of years with Beşiktaş fans. We experienced those incredible highs, but it's important to know that there's always going to be lows as well. But one of the things, I think he said some really good stuff and stuff that we both liked, especially the distribution and how he's hopefully going to help the team, especially building up from the back quicker. Because one of the things I always disliked, disliked is maybe a little bit harsh. I think we, in our current format, rely way too much on build-up from our center backs. I think if we have a goalkeeper that is able to distribute the ball quicker to the flanks, that's going to help us as well.
We talked about this in the podcast a little bit, but it really can't be stressed enough how much, as like for all of Tolga's strengths and weaknesses, the one, I think for me, determining factor in why I was so hell-bent on seeing him leave and not be our starting goalkeeper was exactly this point, which was that you have to, with the style of play that we've cultivated for these last few years, and whether it's the tiki-taka stuff that we did before or more of this cross-heavy stuff we're doing now, regardless, it requires fluidity, it requires movement, passing, and a huge component of that has been, with Fabry anyhow, pushing the ball back to the keeper when it's necessary, utilizing the 11th man on the pitch, when, and tactically in a way, so losing that via Tolga has been a huge negative, and I think a huge void tactically for us. So it's actually something that from Jon's interview, I can say I'm coming away with a much more positive outlook about this whole thing. I was, to be perfectly honest, kind of unaware that he, could be considered good in the field. So yeah, that was great.
For sure. So shall we wrap things up here on our Loris Karius special? I think we're both looking forward to seeing him in action, and it might happen sooner rather than later, because I read earlier in an article with an interview, I think, with Utku Yuvakuran's dad. And the story was mainly about whether or not Utku is going to stay with Beşiktaş, but he did mention something along the lines of in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Tolga will be out, and Utku is going to be needed in the team, and with Karius now probably going in as a first goalkeeper, it was important for Utku to be ready still as the backup. But that might mean that on Thursday Utku plays again against Partizan, and you know what?
Go.
Yesterday we said it before, that he didn't have any blame in any of the goals. So let's hope he does well on Thursday if he does end up playing. But if it's true and Tolga is out for 2 to 3 weeks, then it's very likely that Karius is going to make his first start on the weekend against Bursaspor already. And you know what? At this point, I just want him in the team as fast as possible. Just get him in there. If he makes a mistake, so be it. But I think it's important that we don't waste any more time with Tolga.
And that's a perfect note to close out our portion of the Loris Karius special. If there's one thing we as fans can take away from what Jon Townsend said about his situation before, I'd like to highlight the depression aspect and the fact that this is a human being who went through an incredibly trying moment in a huge moment for footballing wise, like a Champions League final. We have to get behind this guy. We can't, that stunt we pulled with Ozan in the stadium yesterday. We can't do that with this guy. We have to recognize that this is an investment we're making financially in a young player who could theoretically become a world-class goalkeeper, and we have to play as fans a part in cultivating that. We can't get too down on this guy, whether he comes in flying out of the gates or not. So if there's something we can take, practically from today's episode, it's how can we be the best fans possible in cultivating this young goalkeeper into the keeper we need for the next maybe decade or more.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that earlier. Actually, it's not likely, but it's possible that 10 years from now, in 2028, we'll be sitting here in episode 5900 or something of Black Eagles podcast, and we'll still be talking about Loris Karius, our goalkeeper. It's possible,
Yeah.
It's not very likely, but it's possible.
And knock on wood to our health, knock on wood to his health and to his success. But yeah, exactly.
For sure.
That's the nature, that's the scope of what we have to be, of how we have to consider this. But so on that note, Kaan, send us out. Tell our esteemed followers what's in store for them here in today's special send out for the Loris Karius episode.
So we hope that you enjoyed this interview with Jon Townsend as much as we did. You can follow him on Twitter at Jon_Townsend3, but he already plugged that earlier. The rest of our social media plugs you can find in the description of our podcast. And we have a very special After the Beat in store for you this time. We have a couple of experts and a couple of Liverpool fans that decided to send in their voice messages for the After the Beep segment, and they'll be telling us their opinions on Loris Karius. And you can also find, if we have them, their social media plugs in the description. So without further ado, Sinan?
Go Beşiktaş and go Loris Karius. If you're out there and listening to this, because I'm sure you do speak English, and hey, what the hell, we just made an entire episode based on you. I just want to say, sir, that it's a pleasure having you on the team, and we hope you enjoy success for years to come. On that note, yes, please go Beşiktaş and enjoy our special hashtag After the Beat. That's it. That was a nice episode. And this, I think,
Well, it's official. We have found Fabry's replacement in Karius. I have some minor concerns, not about his talent, but the fans' current state. Nearly everyone is upset about the lack of transfers, and I believe this kind of makes everyone expect the best out of Karius. He's a decent goalie, don't get me wrong, but he's mentally fragile. If we can help him get out of that mindset, I'm sure he will do wonders here. We're looking at a keeper who was dubbed the next starter for the Mannschaft. Last season, before that nightmare of a game, he was performing really well, actually. He was being compared to De Gea and Courtois. There were debates about which one is the best in the Prem. Liverpool seemed like they have finally found a goalie that can be dependable after Pepe Reina left. And I was so relaxed that as a Liverpool fan, we wouldn't have to be in the market for a keeper. But we all know what happened. I'm pretty sure that if Karius didn't bottle in the final, he would have been an untouchable asset for the Reds. But such is life, and hope he will make a fresh start and showcase himself at Beşiktaş. He's good with his feet. Maybe not as good as Fabry, but he can still be that extra passing option during build-up play. He's certainly better than Fabry in terms of reflexes, and in my opinion, he will be the next best goalie in the Super League in terms of one-on-ones. I reckon he will play as a sweeper keeper, a role that Fabry was executing perfectly. Tolga can't play like that. For the playstyle the Beşiktaş adopts, you need to have a sweeper keeper. That's essential. Therefore, Karius is a pinpoint transfer in my opinion, considering the current situation of the market, where the record fee for a keeper was broken twice. To sum up, I believe that he will be quite useful for the Black Eagles. The only thing that matters is that the fans shouldn't get on his back if he makes a mistake, obviously. If the club and the fans support him, I have no doubts that he will thrive. That is certain.
Hey guys, Kaan here. I heard you're going to be getting some Loris Karius time soon, so just thought I'd drop by and let you know what to expect. To be honest, there was a lot of excitement at first from a big part of the Liverpool fan base when he arrived. Obviously coming in from the Bundesliga, and he was very highly rated there. And to be honest, because of Jurgen Klopp, a lot of Liverpool fans, we're talking particularly about the online contingent here, would be very excited about anybody linked from the Bundesliga simply because Klopp came from there. The assumption being that he knew who was best, and whoever was going to come in from the German league would therefore automatically be excellent. Obviously, we know it hasn't quite worked out that way, but it's not as though we can say Karius is a bad goalkeeper. We're not completely blaming him for everything that's gone wrong here. He had two spells at trying to be the number one goalkeeper at Liverpool. When he came in originally, he was injured in pre-season, so it took him a little bit of time to get into the team then instead of Simon Mignolet. And his form was uneven, to be honest, and deservedly so. Mignolet regained his place by the end of that first season. Last year, though, Mignolet started in goal, and when his performances weren't any good, Karius came in. So you can see already there wasn't a particularly high ceiling that he had to reach just to become the number one. Now, in fairness to Karius, between, let's say, the turn of the year and April, he was very, very good. His form and his confidence definitely increased. He was instrumental in quite a few victories that we had, and it was then only really at the end of the season, obviously the biggest game of all, the Champions League final, where those mistakes just seemed to bring back everybody's old feelings about not just him but Liverpool's goalkeepers in general. We'd had such big problems with them for such a long time, and then for that to surface in the biggest game of all, the biggest one we've played in years, it just compounded all the problems that had come beforehand and made those errors even worse. Even taking into account the fact that he was diagnosed afterwards with concussion, I think that probably would have swayed some fans, but then he came back in pre-season and it seemed that he had diminished somewhat. He didn't look confident, he didn't really look assured, he made a couple of mistakes in pre-season games, which don't matter, everybody does them, the outfield players do them too, but Karius was coming back into the team on the back of those, and he really needed a solid pre-season. And I think a lot of people lost patience with him then. There is still a good goalkeeper there. There's no doubt about that. He's a very competent player when he's confident. But the biggest thing he's going to need now with his move to Beşiktaş is mental resilience. He's going to need to be able to not just back himself, but actually bounce back. unfortunately, the case is now that the next time he makes a mistake, people are still going to look at, well, he hasn't improved, well, he hasn't got rid of those mistakes from his game, but it's not necessarily about that. You've got to give him a little bit of time. He's not seemed to be someone who can just walk into the team and be excellent straight away, but with a run of games, he steadily improved last year, as I say. Coming for crosses, he's always been quite confident at that. He's always been on the front foot, coming outside of his 6-yard box. He's not too bothered about that. One-on-ones, he's also very brave. He'll come flying off his line to stop a forward who's running in on goal. His reflexes are pretty good. He can make extraordinary saves sometimes. So there's not glaring weaknesses in his game. I think at the moment, certainly over the last few months, you would say the mentality is the biggest thing he needs to work on. Confidence in himself as well as playing his natural game. Perhaps a change of scenery works. Maybe working with a different goalkeeping coach will do the trick. I think the fact that it's a 2-year loan that's been talked about is going to do him a lot of good. One, it means he's going to be out of the atmosphere around Anfield for a long time, where he's obviously not got a chance now to play because of Alisson coming in. And secondly, it shows that the new club who are willing to take the chance on him have faith that he's not just going to be like a 6-month stopgap or they're going to rotate in and out. No, they actually want him because they believe that he can be better for them in future. So there's a lot to look forward to, and I do think it's a good move for Karius. I don't think there was really any way back for him. Just with the fans, with the pundits, everybody around the game was always going to be looking at him extra closely. So I think there's still a lot more to come from Karius. I think you're getting a good goalkeeper. He could become very good, but that might take 6 months to show itself. So give him a bit of time, a bit of patience, and I think you can still see a very decent goalkeeper there.
Hey Black Eagles podcast, my name's Lee. I'm an avid Liverpool fan. I've been all my life season ticket holder in the Kop. I've just been asked by a good friend of mine, Hugo, to say a few words regarding Loris Karius. Now, I think he's a fantastic keeper. He came to Liverpool as a second choice keeper, worked his way into the first team squad and kept his place. Having a keeper like Loris Karius for us was fantastic. He could play with his feet. It was like having an extra player on the pitch, as well as being a fantastic keeper. Kept us in a lot of games last season, kept 13 clean sheets. And in the Premier League, that is very, very difficult, believe me, watching these teams in, week out. I also think he was a bit inexperienced when he came to Liverpool. I mean, he was 24, 23 when he came, you know, and the football that he's been playing to the football that he played at Liverpool was completely different. So we had to give him time to bed in. And Champions League football came instantly when we had, and I believe that's getting to that cup was a lot to do with Karius' season, keeping us in games, you know, pulling off saves last minute, penalty saves, and obviously the 13 clean sheets. I think he's a fantastic keeper, a fantastic asset to any team. I'm actually sorry that he's gone, but I know that he wants first team football all the time. And with our new keeper, I don't think he'd get that unless, you know, he's making mistakes. Loris Karius, in his time, probably made 2 mistakes, and they were the final. And it was just a shame it was the final, because I don't think there was a comeback from that. Well, an immediate comeback anyway. I think that we had to address that situation. But I also think Loris Karius will learn from that and improve. And I also think that he's going to be one of the top keepers in the world. So if you I know he's on loan. If you manage to keep him and keep him happy, and the team keep him happy, I think he'd be a fantastic asset. Anyway, that's all from me. Have a great season. Hope to see you in another game soon. Take care. Bye.
Beşiktaş International hopes you enjoyed this program.